Hey friends, Fallen Messiah here. We're only a couple hours away from a new season in Diablo 4, at least at the time of making of this video, and as usual, at the start of every season, we get a lot of fresh faces in the game. Both new players trying for the first time, and returning players who haven't played for a while. So in this video, I'm going over little tips and tricks that can really help you on your journey, especially if it's your first time. Now, before I tell you what this video is, let me tell you what it is not. It is not a comprehensive video guide about every activity in the game, whether it's the pit, or the hordes, or the undercity. It is not a guide on how to level from 1 to 60 in 10 minutes. Nor does it go into minute details about some core mechanics like, for example, enchanting, crit strike chance, etc. I can make that kind of video too, but it would be over an hour long, and most of you probably wouldn't bother to watch it. Though that said, if you have some specific mechanic or activity you like explained into more detail, and more people are interested, let me know, and I will make a separate video about that. But there's a lot of resources online already explaining these things, and Diablo 4 isn't a super complex game to begin with. However, that being said, there is a learning curve to it, just like with anything else. The purpose of this video, therefore, is to give you some tips and tricks and explain some quality of life mechanics that will save you a lot of time along the way while playing the game. Some useful knowledge that I haven't really seen explained or talked about all that much online. And even though this video is mostly aimed at newbies and beginners, if you're a seasoned veteran of the game, tell me, did you know everything? Or did I manage to surprise you? And what would you add to this video? Anyway, let's get straight to it. Number one thing I would like to talk about is leveling. Now, I did say that this isn't exactly a power level guide, but on some of my builds, I noticed that some of you guys are like, okay, so all of this is nice and well, but how do I get there? Do you have like a leveling guide or something? Well, here's the thing. There's some nice leveling guides on sites like Maxroll, for example, for every class. Well, let me tell you something. If you're new to the game, or haven't played for a while, you don't really need them. You don't need someone telling you how to play the game, especially if you haven't played the game before. Just pick a class archetype that seems the most fun to you, try it out, try out all the skills, and find a playstyle that speaks to you. The class leveling guides are mostly for players who are veterans of the game and just want to get the process quickly. But even with that in mind, as someone who is a veteran of the game, I still don't use them. So my advice for you would be to level in the same way that I do. This is especially true for new players or just for people who don't want to follow any guides until they reach the endgame. And the way that I do that is simply by leaning on legendary aspects and unique items that you find along the way. Let me show you what I mean. So during your leveling process, right, you have your skill tree and everything else, you have your basic skills that generate resource, you have core skills that spend resource, you have supporting skills, you have the defensive skills. You're gonna figure that out all by yourself. But basically, as you play the game, as you kill monsters, eventually, you will get some legendary aspects and you will get some unique items too. Unique items and legendary aspects have affixes that speak to different skills. Like, let's say for example, I killed a monster and suddenly this dropped. And this speaks to Whirlwind. Whirlwind's crit chance increases by 12% up to 36%. So maybe I had something else, maybe I had a yellow item, and then I found this. Let's say I didn't use Whirlwind, I used Hammer of the Ancients, right? And then I find this item that gives me more crit strike chance for Whirlwind. Oh, you know what? I might actually change it. Or, maybe it were these pants that make my Earthquakes deal more damage, so I focus on Earthquake. Just stuff of that nature. As you keep playing the game and leveling, you will get items that speak to different skills. And also, starting from Season 7, you also get these class archetype drops when you complete different season journey quests. So this can also help you to lean into different kind of mechanics for your class. That's basically how I play every season. I never bother with any leveling guides, I just play the game and I use what drops to my advantage. One thing that I would like to speak about though, when it comes to leveling, is make sure you don't forget your tempers. Masterworking is an endgame mechanic, but tempering is not. You can temper pretty much immediately. You still need the recipes to drop, but as soon as they do, make sure to leverage them. Like, let's say for example, I use these leggings, and then I put max life into them. Just like that, with one single temper, I have 140 extra life. And these things add up quickly, even while you're leveling. Like, tempers can really enhance your build. That doesn't mean that you're gonna have resources to temper every single item, but on a good item, especially like a weapon, you know, you should temper it to increase your damage, or you should temper your, you know, defensive-minded items like, you know, pants or chest for more life, more resist. So make sure to use your tempers along the way. So that would be kind of my tips and tricks regarding leveling. Okay guys, let's talk about the second tip of the day, which is favorite items. Now this is actually my favorite mechanic in the entire game. It's such a big quality of life upgrade, and it basically idiot-proofs your items from yourself. What do I mean by that? Well, I have a bunch of items over here, and most of them are garbage. But let's say I want to actually keep some of them and maybe inspect them for later. So easy way to do that. So let's say I have a bunch of these, you know, garbage legendaries. I'm interested in these that have this little star, this little asterisk. This is an ancestral item, and these are really much the only items worth keeping, you know, in endgame in Diablo 4. So what I would do, I simply double tap my spacebar, and now it has this little blue ribbon on top of it. This means that I favorited this item. So I'm gonna do this for every single ancestral item. Let's say, for example, this one has 2 greater apexes, so I wanna inspect this for later. So I favorited every single ancestral legendary item, and then I just go to the blacksmith. It's going to salvage all items in the inventory, but it's going to keep the ones that I favorited. This prevents them from being destroyed, so I can inspect them later. Now, none of these are actually any good. This is just for demonstration purposes, but this is something that you can do and save yourself a lot of time. So if you're in the middle of a, you know, intense gaming session, maybe you're doing some kind of rotations or something, maybe you're doing bosses, maybe you're doing horde, and you have a lot of items, you can do this to save yourself a lot of time. You just favorite them, you salvage all the other items, and then you can quickly move these to stash and you can inspect them later, you know, when you have a little bit more time. But that's just one thing that the favorite item mechanic can do. There are a lot of things that it's really useful for as well. For example, if I take an item that I favorited, I actually cannot drop it. I cannot drop it from my inventory in any way, shape, or form. Not only that, I also cannot trade it with another player too. So if I had another player here and we open the, you know, the trade UI, the trade window, and if I try to put this on, it would not let me. It would not let me until I unfavorite the item again, and now I can drop it again, now I can trade it again. It's really idiot-proofing an item. It's actually really amazing, and it's such a small kind of mechanic in the game, but I really love it because you basically cannot do anything to remove this item from your inventory, your character, or your stash unless you unfavorite the item again. It works on more things than just, of course, items. It also works on consumables. For example, if I particularly want to save this elixir of fortitude for something, I don't know why, but I can. And it's especially useful for this dungeon keys tab. Now, pay special focus on this because a lot of people have really screwed themselves over by not understanding one simple thing. If you go, for example, to the occultist, or this box that pretends to be an occultist in the den, and you press salvage all keys, this action is going to salvage every single item you have in the Dungeon Keys tab. It doesn't matter if it's a sigil, or if it's a tribute, or if it's a compass. A lot of people have really screwed themselves over like that, and even I did on a couple occasions. It happens. If you failed to favorite like a legendary tribute or a unique tribute, these are pretty rare, you know, you can lose all of your tributes, you know, at one fell swoop just by not using the favorite mechanic. So you can see that I favorited, you know, all the compasses, you know, I favorited, you know, all the legendary tributes, I favorited all the, you know, rare tributes as well, because if I didn't, you know, the occultist is going to salvage all 19 of these tributes of radiance, and I don't want that. So once again, if you're in the occultist inventory, anything that is not blacked out like this, or that doesn't have this little, you know, blue ribbon, which means you didn't favorite it, you will lose it. So observe. All keys, bam. they're just gone. Just to demonstrate that it works on tributes as well, I just split one single tribute of harmony from my stack of 57. All keys, bam, it's gone. So understanding this, understanding what favoriting items does for you, not only in saving time, but also in preventing screw-ups like these where you can lose valuable tributes, compasses, etc., can save you a lot of time. Let's talk about the third tip, which is a quick access wheel, also known as the emote wheel, which is, if you're playing on PC, default key is E. However, this does so much more things than just emotes. So you can save a lot of things for quick access here, and you can customize it however you want. For example, just by pressing E and then clicking on Leave Dungeon, I can leave Dungeon quickly. This is just one of the many things that you can do. I will talk about Leave Dungeon and what it does in my next tip. But basically, other than emotes, like let's say you have some kind of consumables you want to access, you can absolutely customize it and you can put anything here. So let's say I'm using Elixir of Fortitude all the time. I can just put it here. I save changes and bam, suddenly it's right here. So that's something useful to know. If you're having things that you wish to access pretty quickly, you can. Also, a special tip for hardcore players, you should definitely put scrolls of escape here. That way you press E and then you just click and you escape immediately from a very dangerous situation. Well guys, let's talk about tip number 4. Using Town Portal versus using Leave Dungeon. What's the difference? Well, both of these actions are going to take you out of your dungeon, but they teleport you to 2 different places. If you use Town Portal, which is a T key by default on your keyboard, like this for example, it is going to teleport you to the center of a town that you put as your favorite town, or to the waypoint of that location. So for example, if you open the world map, currently, my favorite is Karigar. You can put that whatever you want just by right-clicking on any other waypoint. So for example, you can have this Tarsarak, or you can put Zarbitzet, which is my favorite. And then you press T, it will take you to the center of that town, to the waypoint. However, the second mechanic is Leave Dungeon. It's usually on your quick access wheel, which I talked about earlier. So by pressing E, you have it over here. I remember when I played the game, and I was in my first couple of dungeons, and I was like, okay, surely there has to be a way to exit these dungeons without going to town, but I just couldn't find it, So it's not super intuitive. Leave Dungeon is going to put you to the beginning of any dungeon on the map. So for example, let's say I want to run a random dungeon like Halls of the Damned. If I clear Halls of the Damned and I'm in the end, or whenever I choose to leave, I press Leave Dungeon, it's going to teleport me to the entrance of that dungeon. However, the reason why this is important is because certain dungeons, like the Undercity or the pit where I am right now, are actually in town, so they will take you to town if you press Leave Dungeon, which means that both Town Portal and Leave Dungeon will take you to the town, but only in different places. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're in Act 5 and you're running the new Undercity with 4 people. Why would you play in a party of 4? Well, let's say you have these tributes of refinement. You put 1 tribute, but everyone benefits at the end of the Undercity by getting 2,000 master working materials per run. So this is a good way to stretch out your tributes. You will get a lot more than just by running by yourself. So if you use the tribute, and then when you kill the final boss, if you leave the dungeon, it will teleport you to the beginning of the Undercity, and then you can just go again. If you use teleport, however, it's going to put you to the center so you can repair or salvage your gear. So knowing the difference is important depending on what you want to do. If you're doing quick runs of Tribute of Refinement, usually every 4th run you go to the town square to repair and salvage. Other than that, you're trying to get these runs as quickly as you can, and that's why when you kill the boss, you will simply leave the dungeon, so you can go through the rotation very quickly. But the most important difference actually is the pit, where I am right now. So if you want to remember the difference between leaving the dungeon and teleporting, then this is the most important example. So I just killed the boss, and now I have the opportunity to level my glyphstones. So let's say I have 4 upgrades available. I upgrade 3 times, and I just forgot to upgrade again. If I teleport, that's fine. I'm back in town that I put as my favorite, and then I can just simply return back to my own town portal and I will be back in the pit. However, if you failed to pick up, for example, some kind of item, let's say I forgot to pick this up, I forgot to level my glyph, and I leave the dungeon instead, then the pit will close and there is no longer any other way for me to return back. So just something to consider. If you're running the pit solo and you leave the dungeon, that pit is gone. If you didn't pick up something, if you didn't level your glyph, it's gone. But if you use a town portal, you can return back. So that's by far the most important difference between these two actions. And this distinction and knowing why they're different just serves to, save you some time and prevents you from losing progress. And guys, for my last tip of the day, tip number 5 is using advanced tooltips to your advantage. Now, they are disabled by default. Let me show you what this means. Let's say I have 2 different polearms here. Let's ignore the stats of these weapons for a moment and just focus on the actual legendary aspects. Like for example, this says Hammer of the Ancients does 40% increased damage. On the other hand, I have this polearm that speaks to a different kind of skills, like while I gain Berserking, I deal 1200 fire damage every second. Now this one seems like a lot bigger number, right? So maybe that will be better for me? Well, that's why advanced tooltips are important, because there are 2 main ways to add damage to your build. There's additive damage sources and multiplicative damage sources. Now, because advanced tooltips are disabled by default, the game doesn't tell you from the start what kind of source of damage you're actually getting, so you have to enable it. You do that by going to your options, gameplay, advanced tooltip information, check this, and save changes. Notice that now we have this little X next to the 40%. This means this is a multiplicative source of damage. So if I use this item, I will actually gain 40% straight up extra damage on my Hammer of the Ancient skill. There are various sources of multiplication in the game and they're all very powerful. That's basically how we scale damage. Whether that's from the aspects or paragon or skills, we're basically trying to stack as much sources of multiplicative damage as we can to deal the most damage in any given time. On the other hand, this other item only does flat damage, and by the time you hit significant difficulties like Torment 1, Torment 2, etc., this really doesn't serve you any benefit whatsoever. So the damage on the other item is completely irrelevant and doesn't help. So just understanding these differences, understanding that, if it says plus, it's an additive form of damage, and it does very little to your overall damage output. If it says X, it's multiplicative. Just knowing how to read these and enabling advanced tooltips is gonna help you a lot. And finally, you also have the option to show you the damage numbers, or you can also disable it just by going a little bit lower in the gameplay section and clicking showing combat text. If you disable it, it will not show you any damage numbers, or you can only allow it to display critical damage or only overpowers or any of the combination. So this is something that you can also enable or disable depending on your preferences. And there you have it, guys. These have been my top 5 tips and tricks for all the beginners and returning players to the game. I hope you have fun playing the season. What characters are you going to play? If you're looking for something unique, I have a build for a Mighty Throw Barb that only deals damage once every 12 seconds, but we overpower for a massive bonk when we do. Or how about Return to the Classic, an Ice Shard Sorcerer build that won't be a top build this season, but still has a super fun action fast-paced gameplay. Or, if you really want to dominate the game and be competitive, my Cataclysm Druid makes a return for Season 8 as well, and is looking to be top build this season once again. Anyway, that's been it for me in this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider subscribing. It really helps me a ton and it motivates me to do more of these kind of videos. That's gonna it for me, guys. Happy blasting, and I'll see you in the next one.